The torches in the Hall of Ashen Crowns burned the color of dying suns. Soraya pressed her spine against the cold granite of the gallery pillar, her fingers white against the stone, and watched the lie unfold below. The hall was vast, carved from the bones of the mountain itself during the first age of wolves. And tonight, every seat, every alcove, every shadow-drenched corner was packed with bodies. Pack leaders draped in ceremonial furs, merchant lords glittering with silver chains, common wolves who had walked for weeks through winter passes just to witness this moment. The severance. Not a wedding, not a union. Something far worse. Below the gallery, on the obsidian dais where generations of Alpha Kings had taken their oaths, her family stood in a line. Her mother, Odara, in widow's black, her face arranged in an expression of practiced grief. Her older brother Fenric, rigid and square-jawed beside their mother, his hand resting on the pommel of a sword he had never drawn in honest combat. And between them, draped in ceremonial white like a corpse prepared for burning, stood her younger sister, Ravel. Ravel, who had always wanted what Soraya had. Ravel, who was about to receive it. "We gather tonight under ancient law," the High Warden intoned from his place beside the dais. His voice was a dry rasp that somehow filled the enormous space, bouncing off the carved wolf heads that lined the upper walls. A matter of bloodline, a matter of succession, a matter of the crown. Soraya's chest constricted until she thought her ribs might splinter inward. She should not have come. She had been warned, by the kitchen maid who still slipped her scraps of information, by the tremor in her own instincts, that tonight would break whatever remained of her. But she had to see. She had to know if Kale would let it happen. The Alpha King stood apart from the others, at the far edge of the dais, where the torchlight barely reached him. He was dressed in the deep charcoal of the Dravain line, no ornamentation, no crown, just the raw authority of a man whose presence bent the spines of every wolf in the room. His dark hair was longer than she remembered, unkempt in a way that spoke of neglect rather than style. His jaw was shadowed with days of unshaved growth, and his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once tracked her across crowded rooms with a hunger that made her blood sing, stared at nothing. For 8 months, she had known a different man behind those eyes. The man who had found her gathering moonwort in the castle's lower gardens at midnight, back when she was still a servant with a healer's training she kept hidden from the noble houses, and had simply sat beside her in the dirt without speaking, as if her silence was the only peace he had ever known. The man who had pressed his mouth to the hollow of her throat and whispered words so raw they had stripped the armor from her soul. The man who had bitten her. Not the ceremonial bite of political unions. Not the shallow, performative mark exchanged between arranged mates. Kale had sunk his teeth into the skin above her heart. The sacred place, the place wolves only marked when the bond was absolute and irrevocable. "You are carved into me," he had told her afterward, his lips still wet with her blood. "Before you, I did not know what it meant to be alive." She had believed every word. Her hand drifted to her chest now, fingers pressing against the fabric of her dress where the claiming scar lay hidden beneath. It pulsed with dull, relentless heat. It had not stopped burning since she had been dragged from the castle 6 months ago. "The matter before the crown is thus," the High Warden continued, unrolling a scroll of yellowed parchment. "The House of Rivarin brings formal petition to sever the bond between Kale Dravain, Alpha King of the Western Dominion, and the woman known as Soraya Rivarin, on grounds that said, 'Woman is deceased.'" The word hit Soraya like a fist to the sternum. Deceased. A murmur rippled through the hall. Soraya watched her mother lower her head in a perfect imitation of sorrow, watched Fenric place a comforting hand on Odara's shoulder, watched Ravel's chin tremble with artfully rehearsed grief. They had told the kingdom she was dead. 6 months ago, the High Warden read from the scroll, Soraya Rivarin, eldest daughter of House Rivarin, perished in a fall from the cliffs of Mireth Point. Her body was recovered by the sea and laid to rest in the family crypt. Her house mourns her passing and petitions the crown to acknowledge the death, sever the incomplete bond, and consider a new match for the continuity of the royal line. Every word was a blade. Every word was a lie. Soraya had not fallen from any cliff. She had been taken from her bed in the middle of the night by her brother's men, bound and gagged and dragged through underground passages she had not known existed. She had been imprisoned in a stone cell beneath her family's ancestral keep, a place so deep underground that even the dampness tasted of forgotten centuries. For 6 months, she had lived in that darkness, fed enough to survive, told nothing. Visited only by her mother, who came once a week to ask the same question. Will you renounce the bond willingly? And every week Soraya had given the same answer. Never. So they had declared her dead instead. She had escaped 3 days ago, clawed her way through a drainage grate with bleeding fingers, surfaced in a frozen stream, and walked barefoot through the snow until she found the road to the capital. She was gaunt, filthy, and half feral from months of isolation. But she was alive, and she had come to stop this. Except now, standing in the gallery, watching the ceremony proceed, she realized with sickening clarity that she might already be too late. Does the Alpha King accept the evidence of death? The High Warden asked. Every eye in the hall turned to Kael. Soraya stopped breathing. The scar on her chest flared so hot she nearly cried out. He would feel that. Through the bond, incomplete as it was, he would feel the burn answering his. He would know she was close. Kael did not move. His gaze remained fixed on the middle distance, focused on nothing. His hands hung at his sides. His chest rose and fell with the mechanical regularity of a man who was breathing because his body demanded it, not because he had any interest in continuing. He looked, Soraya realized with dawning horror, like a man who had already died and simply forgotten to stop standing. The king accepts, a voice answered. But it was not Kael's voice. Lord Marin Colvert, the king's chief advisor, stepped forward from the shadows behind the throne. He was a tall, angular man with silver hair and the kind of face that smiled without ever reaching the eyes. He had served 3 Alpha Kings and had outlasted them all. His Majesty has reviewed the evidence presented by House Rivarin, Colvert continued smoothly. The death is acknowledged. The bond severance may proceed. Soraya's knees buckled. She caught herself against the pillar, her vision swimming. He was not fighting it. He was standing there, hollow and empty, while they erased her from his life. Why was he not fighting it? Then let the severance be witnessed, the High Warden declared. He produced a blade of black iron, the ritual knife used to cut the bond between a wolf and a deceased mate. Kael Dravain, Alpha King, step forward and bear the mark. Kael moved like a puppet whose strings were pulled by invisible hands. He reached the center of the dais and stood before the High Warden. With hands that did not tremble, because they did not feel, he unfastened the collar of his coat and exposed the left side of his chest. Soraya saw her mark on him. Even from the gallery, she could see it. The silver-white scar above his heart, twin to the one she bore. It seemed to catch the torchlight, glowing faintly, as if the bond itself was trying to scream what the man could not. The High Warden raised the black blade. No, Soraya whispered. The blade descended toward the mark, and Soraya did the only thing she could. She screamed. Not a word. Not a name. A sound ripped from somewhere so deep inside her that it bypassed thought entirely. A raw, tearing howl that shattered the silence of the Hall of Ashen Crowns like a stone through glass. Every wolf in the hall flinched. Several shifted involuntarily, their wolves responding to the primal anguish in that cry. The High Warden's hand froze, the black blade hovering a hair's breadth from Kael's skin. And Kael, empty, hollow, dead-eyed Kael, blinked. Something flickered behind his eyes, a spark in the void. His nostrils flared, pulling in air as if surfacing from deep water, and his head turned toward the gallery with the slow, grinding inevitability of a continent shifting. For one fraction of a heartbeat, his eyes found hers across the vast hall. The storm gray ignited to molten silver. Then, Odara Rivarin's voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. "Seize that woman. She is an impostor desecrating the memory of my dead daughter." And the hall erupted. Guards surged toward the gallery stairs before Soraya could draw another breath. But she was not looking at them. She was looking at Kale, whose body had gone rigid on the dais, whose hands had curled into fists so tight the tendons stood out like bridge cables. The flicker of recognition she had seen was already being swallowed. His eyes glazing, his posture slackening, as if something was pulling him back under. She understood then. This was not grief. This was not acceptance. Whatever had hollowed Kale out was not natural. They had done something to him. The realization slammed through her with physical force, but she had no time to hold it. Armored hands were already reaching for her. She twisted sideways, ducking beneath a guard's grasp, and bolted along the gallery toward the servant's passage she had used to enter. As she ran, her hand pressed against the claiming scar. Beneath the burning, beneath the pain, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since the night they took her. Hope. And beneath her other hand, the one she pressed instinctively to her belly as she ran, she felt the flutter that had begun 3 weeks into her imprisonment. The child she carried was the reason her mother visited every week. The reason the question was always the same. The reason they had not simply killed her outright. Because Soraya was carrying the Alpha King's heir. Odara had discovered the pregnancy within the first month of captivity. The family healer had confirmed it. Confirmed, too, that the child's wolf signature was unmistakably royal. "Renounce the bond," her mother had said, her voice as cold as the stone walls of the cell. "Renounce it, and the child will be raised as Fenric's. No one will ever know. You can disappear quietly, and the family will be positioned exactly where it needs to be." Where it needed to be was on the throne. With the bond severed and Soraya officially dead, Ravel would step forward as the replacement mate. The child, raised as a reverend nephew, would be leverage for decades. It was elegant, it was monstrous, and Soraya would die before she let it happen. Now, 7 months along and running through castle corridors on legs weakened by half a year of captivity, Soraya carried the only secret that mattered. The Alpha King's bloodline was alive, and if her family discovered that she had escaped, that secret would become her death warrant. Soraya made it to the servants' passage before the guards reached the gallery landing. The narrow corridor was empty. Every servant had been summoned to attend the severance ceremony. Soraya ran through them on bare feet that left bloody prints on the cold stone. The gap in the outer wall she had squeezed through to enter the castle was too narrow for a woman 7 months pregnant to fit through again. The scullery exit. The one used by kitchen boys to dump waste into the ravine behind the castle. It was a crawl-through passage barely wide enough for a grown man, but it opened onto the hillside below the eastern wall, outside the guard perimeter. She had spent 2 years as a servant here before Kale had found her in the gardens that night. 2 years learning every passage, every shortcut, every forgotten corner of this ancient fortress. Behind her, she heard shouting. Boots on stone, the clatter of armor moving fast, and beneath it, something else. A howl. Not from behind her. From above. From the great hall itself. It was Kale's voice, but not his voice. Something deeper. More animal, torn from a place beyond conscious thought. It was the sound of a wolf who had scented his mate after believing her dead. The sound of a creature waking from a drugged sleep into a reality more painful than any nightmare. The claiming scar blazed white-hot, and she gasped, stumbling against the wall. Through the bond, she felt it. a tidal wave of confused, agonized awareness crashing against the walls of whatever cage they had built around his mind. He was fighting, clawing toward the surface, reaching for her through the bond with a desperation that made her teeth ache. But he was not free. Whatever they had done to him, it was holding. The awareness she felt was fractured, flickering, like a candle flame in a hurricane. "I will come back for you," she whispered, pressing her palm flat against the stone wall. "I swear it, Kale. I will come back." Then she turned and kept running. She emerged onto the hillside in the blue-gray light of pre-dawn, gasping, shaking, her dress torn and her hands bleeding fresh from the crawl. Below her, the capital city of Ashenmere spread across the valley. Behind her, the castle loomed against the sky like a crouching beast. There was only one direction that offered safety: the Thorn Vale, the ancient forest that bordered the western edge of the Dominion, so old and so vast that even wolves avoided its deepest reaches. Stories said that something lived in the Thorn Vale that predated wolfkind entirely, that the trees themselves watched and judged, and sometimes swallowed travelers whole. Soraya did not care. She would take her chances with ancient trees over her own family. Behind her, another howl split the sky, longer than the first, rawer, edged with something that sounded like her name being torn apart letter by letter. Soraya pressed her hand to her belly, where the baby shifted restlessly, responding to its father's anguish through the bond that connected all three of them. "We will see him again," she whispered. "I promise you. But first, we survive." She did not look back. She did not see Fenric Reverin appear at the scullery opening moments later, his face white with fury. She did not see him signal to the three dark-cloaked figures who waited at the tree line, wolves bred for tracking, for silence, for the kind of work that left no witnesses. And she did not hear her brother's command, spoken softly enough that only the hunters could hear. "Find her. End it. Bring back the body." By the time the sun rose over Ashenmere, Soraya had vanished into the Thorn Vale, and the hunt had begun. 5 months. Soraya had not expected to survive the first week. The Thorn Vale had swallowed her whole on that frozen morning. For 3 days she had stumbled through undergrowth so thick it tore her clothing to ribbons, drinking from icy streams and eating whatever roots her healer's training told her were safe. The hunters her brother had sent found her trail twice. She had heard their wolves moving through the brush, had smelled the copper and iron scent of shifted predators on the wind. Both times, the forest had intervened. The first time, a deadfall of massive branches had crashed across the path behind her, so perfectly timed that it could not have been coincidence. The second time, the ground itself had simply swallowed their tracks, a bog appearing where solid earth had been minutes before, sucking down the lead hunter until the others dragged him free and retreated. The Thornvale did not want them here, but it had, for reasons Soraya could not explain, decided to tolerate her. On the 4th day, she had found the village. Greyhaven sat in a natural clearing deep enough inside the forest that most maps did not acknowledge its existence. 30 stone cottages arranged around a well, so old the carvings on its rim had been worn smooth by 10,000 hands. The villagers were not wolves. They were human, isolated forest folk who trusted the trees more than any king. Soraya had collapsed at the edge of the clearing, 7 months pregnant and barely conscious. A woman named Bray had found her. Bray was the village's bone setter and herb woman, a broad-shouldered widow in her 60s, with hands like oak roots and a voice that could gentle a spooked horse. She had taken one look at Soraya's swollen belly, her bare and bleeding feet, and the haunted caverns of her eyes, and had simply picked her up and carried her home. She gave her name as Marin, a widow, fleeing a bad situation. Bray had accepted this with the particular silence of a woman who recognized lies but understood why they were necessary. Now, 5 months later, spring had arrived in the Thorn Vale with explosive force. The ancient trees had erupted into leaf almost overnight, their canopy filtering the sunlight into a green-gold haze that made the entire forest feel like the inside of a living cathedral. Wildflowers choked the meadows surrounding Greyhaven. The stream that ran past Soraya's borrowed cottage ran clear and fast with snowmelt. And Soraya's daughter was 2 months old. Ilara. She had chosen the name instinctively, as if the child had whispered it to her during the agonizing hours of labor. Bray had delivered the baby in the cottage while a spring storm raged outside, and when the old woman had placed the squalling infant on Soraya's chest, the claiming scar had flared with such sudden warmth that Bray had actually flinched. Ilara was a quiet baby, unnervingly so. She rarely cried, instead watching the world with wide gray eyes, her father's gray, that tracked movement with a focus no infant should possess. And sometimes, late at night, Soraya would wake to find the scar burning. Not the dull ache she had grown accustomed to. Something sharper. Fragments of emotion that were not her own. Fury, so tightly compressed it vibrated. Anguish, worn smooth by repetition into something almost indistinguishable from madness. And searching. Always searching. A presence moving across the landscape of their bond, like a lighthouse beam sweeping an empty ocean. Kale was looking for her. The emotions bleeding through the bond were getting worse. The fury was calcifying into something darker, and the anguish had developed an edge that felt less like grief and more like a mind beginning to consume itself. He was deteriorating. Every night, Soraya pressed her hand to the scar and tried to push something back through the bond. Calm, warmth, the steady heartbeat of their daughter. The bond had never been completed. The mutual claiming interrupted by her abduction, and incomplete bonds were unreliable at best. But she tried, every night. Then one night the bond pulsed with something new. Not fury, not anguish, not searching. Recognition. As if, somewhere far away, a lighthouse had finally caught the faintest glimmer of reflection from a distant shore. Soraya sat up in the dark, her hand flying to her chest. The pulse came again. Stronger, more focused. Then Ilara woke and screamed. A full-throated, piercing cry unlike any sound the quiet baby had ever made, and the bond went dark as if a door had been slammed shut. Something had changed. She did not know if that was salvation or catastrophe. The peddler arrived in Greyhaven on a Tuesday. This was unusual. Greyhaven received traders perhaps twice a year. Hardy merchants willing to brave the Thornvale for the village's exceptional honey. They came in summer, stayed no more than 2 days, and left with visible relief. This man arrived in late spring, alone, with a single mule carrying trade goods that no forest village needed: bolts of silk, silver buttons, a crate of refined sugar. He was too well dressed for a wilderness peddler. His boots were city-made, his hands were uncalloused. Marin. Bray appeared at her door, her voice carefully neutral. The trader is asking questions, the kind that have nothing to do with commerce. He wants to know if any newcomers have arrived in recent months. Young women, specifically. Soraya's arms tightened around Ilara. What did you tell him? That Greyhaven has had no newcomers since old Perrin's nephew came to apprentice 3 years ago. I also told the other villagers to say the same. They will. Greyhaven protects its own. But the peddler did not move on by morning. He stayed 3 days, and on the second day, Soraya heard him talking to the woodcutter's wife outside the well. Terrible business in Ashenmere. The Alpha King has gone. Well, there is no polite word for it. Mad, they say. Completely lost his mind after that business with the dead woman. Soraya pressed herself against the interior wall of her cottage, out of sight, but within earshot. His mate. The family brought a severance petition, said she had died. Then right in the middle of the ceremony, someone screamed from the gallery. A woman. The king reacted like he had been struck by lightning, tore the dais apart with his bare hands. shifted right there in the great hall. It took 6 of his own guard to restrain him. Lord Culver had him confined to the royal chambers for his own safety. Confined. The word landed in Soraya's stomach like a stone. Since then, nothing has been right. The crops in the river provinces withered overnight. The wolf packs along the border have gone feral. The court has fractured. And the king, they say he speaks to someone who is not there, calls a name over and over, and the howling. Every wolf in the capital joins him, every night, for hours. Soraya slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her hand clamped over her mouth. He was imprisoned too. Both of them, caged. Both of them reaching for the other through a bond that was never completed. And the kingdom was rotting from the inside out, because an alpha separated from his true mate was a wound that would not heal until the bond was restored, or one of them died. After the peddler left, Bray came to Soraya's cottage and sat in the chair by the fire without being invited. His boots had the Reverend crest stamped into the heel leather, the old woman said flatly. He was not a peddler. He was a scout. Your name is not Marin. Your child has wolf blood, and whatever you are running from is not a bad situation. It is a powerful family that wants you buried. Yes, Soraya whispered. To all of it. Bray nodded once. Then we had better make sure they do not find you, because that scout will be back, and next time he will not come alone. The scout did not come back. Something worse came instead. 3 weeks after the peddler's visit, Soraya woke to Bray shaking her shoulder in the pre-dawn darkness. There is someone at the village boundary. He came alone, on foot, unarmed. He is asking for you by your real name. He says his name is Hadron, the king's sworn shield brother. And he says, if you do not speak with him, the king will be dead before the next moon. The man who waited at the northern edge of the village looked like he had crawled through a war to get there. Tall and lean, with dark skin bearing fresh scratches from the Thornvale's undergrowth. A healing gash ran from his left temple to his jaw, but his eyes, deep amber, wolf bright, were steady and burning with purpose. Soraya Rivarin, I have been searching for you for 7 weeks. I will not waste your time or mine with pleasantries. How did you find me? The forest does not permit. The forest permitted me because I carry something it recognizes. Hadron withdrew a leather cord from his coat. Hanging from it was a single wolf's tooth, curved, yellowed, ancient. A relic of the first wolves, the ones who planted the Thornvale 10,000 years ago. He let the tooth drop against his chest. The man I swore my life to protect is being murdered by inches, and you are the only person in this world who can stop it. Then Hadron told her everything. The compound, a derivative of nightshade root combined with distilled wolf's rue, had been administered daily in Kale's food and drink since the week before her abduction. It severed the connection between the man and his instincts, his bond sense, his ability to feel his mate. Lord Culver had been dosing him on the Rivarin's instructions, the abduction, the false death, the severance petition, all coordinated. After the severance was interrupted, Culver tripled the dosage. Kale was now confined to the royal chambers. The compound had degraded his mind to the point where he could barely distinguish waking from dreaming. He did not eat unless forced. He did not speak except to call her name. He is dying, Soraya. The compound is destroying his body. His wolf is tearing itself apart trying to break free. He has weeks at most. Why not go to the other packs? Because Culver controls the information leaving the capital. The Reverends have positioned your sister as a stabilizing presence, the compassionate noblewoman tending to the broken king. Ravel visits his chambers daily. She sits beside his bed and whispers to a man too drugged to recognize her face. She is simply waiting for him to die, so the Reverends can install their bloodline on the throne. Then Hadron withdrew a folded piece of paper bearing Fenric Reverend's seal. 4 lines in her brother's sharp, angular hand. The forest scouts have confirmed activity in the deep Thornvale. A settlement. The asset may be sheltering there. Dispatch the pale company. No survivors. The child is no longer useful. The substitute timeline is in place. End both. End both. Her brother was sending professional killers. Ravel's fabricated pregnancy eliminated the need for a real heir. Ilara had gone from leverage to liability. How long before they arrive? 6 days, perhaps 7. 6 days before professional killers descended on a village of 30 human families who had shown her nothing but kindness. I cannot run again, Soraya said. If I run, they follow. And whoever shelters me next becomes a target. No, Hadron agreed. You cannot run. Then I go back. To Ashenmere. To Kale. But not to beg. Not to plead. Her voice hardened into something forged in 6 months of darkness and the primal love of a mother who had just read her child's death warrant. If the Reverends want a ghost, I will give them one. I will walk into that castle and I will tear their conspiracy apart from the inside, and I will put my hand on Kale's chest and pull him back from whatever edge they have pushed him to. Hadron studied her for a long moment. Then he dropped to one knee in the wet grass and bowed his head. My queen, he said quietly, command me. They left Greyhaven before dawn. Soraya had spent the night preparing, nursing Ilara one final time in the warm glow of the cottage hearth, memorizing the weight of her daughter's body against her chest, the smell of her hair, the impossible smallness of her fingers. Leaving Ilara was the hardest thing she had ever done, harder than the cell, harder than the escape, harder than walking barefoot through snow. Every step away from that cottage felt like tearing living tissue. If I do not come back, she had said, pressing a sealed letter into Bray's hands, take her deeper into the thorn veil, as deep as it will allow. You are coming back, Bray had said. I will it, and I am considerably more stubborn than any tree. Now Soraya moved through the pre-dawn forest with Hadron at her side, following a path that only the Shield brothers' ancient wolf tooth made visible. They had covered 6 miles when Hadron stopped. His hand came up. A fist. Absolute stillness. Silence. The forest, alive with birdsong minutes ago, had gone completely quiet. They are here, Hadron breathed. The Pale Company. Faster than I calculated. 6 scent lines, 4 wolves, 2 human operatives. They have cut the path. A voice drifted through the trees, conversational, almost bored. The Shield brother and the dead woman, walking together through a fairy tale forest. A figure materialized from behind a massive trunk. Small, barely 5 feet, with cropped silver hair and the stillness of a professional killer. A curved blade hung from each hip. Vela Sen, Hadron said, his voice dropping to something cold. The Pale Company's first blade. And you are just looking in the wrong direction. Soraya spun. 3 wolves emerged from the undergrowth behind them. 2 more figures dropped from the canopy above, crossbows leveled, surrounded. Hadron shifted his weight between Soraya and the closest wolves. I do not need to fight all of you. I only need to fight you long enough. He shifted. The transformation was explosive, clothes shredding as his body detonated into a wolf the color of dark copper, massive and scarred and moving before the change was even complete. He hit the first Pale Company wolf mid-stride, his jaws finding the junction of neck and shoulder with surgical precision. The wolf went down in a spray of dark fur, and Hadron was already turning, already lunging for the second. Go! His voice tore through the bond frequency that all wolves shared. The path splits ahead. Take the left fork. It leads to the river. Soraya ran. Branches whipped her face. Roots snagged her feet. Behind her, the sounds of combat erupted, snarling, the crack of bone, a crossbow bolt thudding into wood. She heard Hadron's wolf roar in pain, heard something heavy strike flesh, heard him keep fighting through it, buying her seconds with his blood. A crossbow bolt hissed past her ear, close enough that she felt the wind of its passage. She ducked, stumbled, caught herself on a tree trunk, and kept moving. The fork appeared ahead. Left, toward the river. Right, toward the forest edge. She veered left. The river appeared through the trees, swollen with spring melt, fast and violent, crashing over boulders with a sound like continuous thunder. Too wide to jump, too fast to wade. No bridge. Soraya skidded to a halt at the bank, her chest heaving, her mind racing. Behind her, she could hear footsteps. Not wolves, human operatives, tracking her on foot through terrain too dense for a shifted wolf to navigate at speed. She turned to face them. Two figures emerged from the trees, the operatives with crossbows, moving with unhurried confidence. They had her cornered. River at her back, killers in front. "Nowhere left to go, love," one of them said, raising his weapon. Soraya looked at the river, looked at the crossbows, looked at her own hands, trembling and empty. No, not empty. The power had been sleeping inside her since Ilara's birth, coiled in the same place where the bond burned, fed by months of fear and fury and the particular, diamond-hard love of a mother separated from her child's father. She had felt it stir during labor, had felt it pulse when Ilara cried, had been afraid to reach for it because she did not know what it was or what it would cost. She was not afraid anymore. Soraya planted her feet and opened her hands. The light that erupted from her palms was not golden. It was white, ice white, the color of the moon reflected on snow. It exploded outward in a shockwave that flattened the undergrowth in a 10-foot radius and hit the two operatives like a wall of solid air. They flew backward, crossbows shattering, bodies crashing through brush and branches before coming to rest in crumpled heaps, 30 feet away. They did not get up. Soraya stared at her hands. The light was fading, but she could feel its source, vast and deep and patient, coiled around the base of her spine like a sleeping serpent. It was the bond, the incomplete bond with Kale, channeled through the claiming scar, amplified by the same wolf magic that had allowed their daughter to be born with her father's gray eyes and the uncanny stillness of a predator. She was not just a healer anymore. The scar pulsed. And this time, unmistakably, she felt an answering pulse from somewhere to the east. Faint, fractured. But there. Kale had felt what she just did. Then Hadron appeared through the trees, limping in human form, his left arm hanging at an angle that made her healer's instincts scream. Blood sheeted down the side of his face from a wound she could not see beneath his matted hair. "Four down," he said, his voice tight with controlled pain. "Two fled, including Vila." He looked at the unconscious operatives, then at Soraya, then at her hands. "What did you do?" "I am not entirely sure." Soraya was already moving toward him, her training overriding the shock. "Sit down. Let me see that arm." "We do not have time." "Sit. Down." He sat. And despite everything, the blood, the pain, the killers who might regroup at any moment, the Shield brother looked at Soraya with something in his amber eyes that had not been there before. Respect. "The king chose well," he murmured, as her hands found the break in his forearm and began to work. "He always said you were more dangerous than you knew." They reached Ashenmere on the third night. Hadran led Soraya through a drainage tunnel beneath the eastern wall, through cellars that smelled of ancient wine, and up a spiraling servant stair. The passage behind the hearth wall opened into the king's private study. It had been destroyed, every book torn from the shelves and shredded, the great oak desk overturned, its surface gouged with claw marks, the window shutters nailed shut from the outside, and on every wall, scratched into the stone with claws or fingers or both, was a single word repeated hundreds of times. Her name, Soraya, 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 carved into the plaster, gouged into the door frame, scratched into the sealed windows in letters so fine they were barely visible until the light caught them. A sound reached her from the adjoining bedchamber. Not a howl, not speech. Something between. A low, continuous, broken sound, like a wounded animal trying to form words it had forgotten. She pushed open the bedchamber door. Cale lay on the edge of the massive bed, his knees drawn to his chest. His body was wasted. The broad shoulders, now sharp beneath skin, stretched too thin, the powerful frame diminished by months of poison. His eyes were open, staring at the wall, seeing nothing. And from his throat came that sound. Her name, degraded by repetition into a shapeless moan. Sor. Aya. Sor. She crossed the room and dropped to her knees beside the bed. Kyle, I am here. Look at me. Nothing. The whispering continued. The compound had buried him so deep that the man who had once heard her heartbeat from across a garden could not recognize her with her hands on his face. She did something she had never attempted. She grabbed the bond with everything she had. Every ounce of power, every shred of love and fury, and forced it open like a door being kicked off its hinges. The claiming scar detonated with white light. Beneath layers of poison and madness, Cale felt it. His body went rigid. The whispering stopped, his eyes focused for the first time in months, on her face. You are not. I dream you. Every night. You are not. I am not a dream. She pressed her forehead to his. The bond was screaming between them, his emotions crashing into hers. She felt everything. The horror of waking from the compound's grip just long enough to call her name before being dragged under again. The moment he had stopped believing she was alive and had simply begun waiting to die. I am real. I am alive. I am here. His fingers found her face, traced her jaw, found the scar through the fabric of her dress, and the sound that came from him was not a word. It was a man who had been drowning for half a year breaking the surface. The Alpha King pressed his face into Soraya's neck and wept with a violence that shook the bed frame. His hands clawed at her back, pulling her closer as if he could seal her into his chest, where no one could take her again. They told me you were dead. They showed me the burial records, the death certificate, your mother's testimony. I tried. Soraya, I tried to disbelieve it. My wolf knew. My wolf screamed that you were alive, but they kept the compound. I could not hold on to what I knew was true. I know. She held him, rocking gently, her tears falling into his unwashed hair. I know what they did. To both of us. Cale, listen to me. They imprisoned me, my family. They locked me in a cell beneath the Reverend Keep for 6 months and told the kingdom I was dead. He pulled back, and the expression on his face made her breath stop. Not grief anymore. Something far more dangerous. They caged you. Yes. While you were carrying my child? The words fell between them like a blade driven into wood. Soraya watched the transformation happen in real time. Not the physical shift, something deeper. The drugged haze retreating from his eyes like fog burned away by a terrible sun. The slack muscles of his jaw tightening into something carved from granite. The hands that had been clawing at her back in desperate need going very, very still. You know, she whispered. I can smell her on you. Despite everything, the poison, the wasting, the months of systematic destruction, the wolf was surfacing. She could see it in the way his pupils contracted, the way his gray irises began to burn with silver light. A daughter. She smells like moonlight and pine and you and me, and something ancient I do not have a name for. His hand hovered over the place where Ilara had rested against her chest for months in the carrying wrap, as if the ghost of his child's warmth still lingered there. Her name is Ilara. He closed his eyes. repeated it silently. When he opened them, the silver was spreading, consuming the gray, burning through the drugged haze with a light that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his body. "I am going to kill them," he said. Not with rage, not with heat, with a calm so absolute it was more terrifying than any howl. Every single one of them, Colvert, your mother, your brother, every hand that touched you, every voice that spoke the lie. Not yet. Soraya pressed her hands to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Erratic, too fast, but stronger than it had been minutes ago. The bond was doing its work, pouring vitality through the connection like water into cracked earth. "First, I have to get the compound out of your system." She spent 4 hours at his bedside, working with every scrap of healing knowledge she possessed. The compound was insidious, layered into his tissues like sediment in rock, each dose building on the last. She could not remove it entirely in one session, but she could break its hold enough for his wolf to begin fighting back. Kale drifted in and out of awareness as she worked, his hand never releasing hers even in the depths of unconsciousness. The bond between them pulsed with each herb she applied, each toxin she drew from his blood, growing stronger, clearer, as if a fogged window was slowly being wiped clean. By the time gray light began seeping through the cracks in the sealed shutters, Kale was sitting upright, still gaunt, still trembling, still bearing the marks of months of systematic poisoning. But his eyes were clear, storm gray, sharp, and burning with controlled fury. Soraya found the compound's blue vial in Colvert's study exactly where Kale had said. She also found something far worse, a bound leather folio stamped with the Rivarin crest. Inside, 2 years of correspondence between Colvert and Odara. Detailed notes on the compound's formulation and dosage, payment records to the Pale Company, and at the back, a timeline. Kale's projected death from compound toxicity, 14 days. Ravel's fabricated pregnancy announcement, 3 days after. Fenric Reverend's appointment as regent, 1 week after the funeral. Formal dissolution of the Dravain line, 30 days from today. A note in the margin, in Colvert's cramped hand, read, "Ensure the castle's lower passages are sealed before the transition. The heartbeat anomaly reported by the Night Watch must not reach the new court." Heartbeat anomaly. The claiming scar did something strange when she read those words. Not burning, vibrating. A low, subsonic tremor pulling her downward, toward the foundation, toward whatever lay beneath the castle floor. She returned to the royal chambers. Hadron stood over the unconscious bodies of 2 guards. "Colvert will know by morning. We have until dawn." She showed him the folio. 14 days. And there is something beneath this castle that Colvert wants sealed before the transition. The Night Watch has been hearing a heartbeat in the lower passages. Kale was on his feet, swaying but standing. Soraya leaves through the eastern postern. She goes to the border packs with the folio. "No." Soraya's voice cut through the chamber. "I did not crawl through a drainage tunnel and cross 300 miles of forest to leave you here alone with people who want you dead. The packs need to see the evidence. Then Hadron goes. I stay." "Soraya." I said what I said. "The last time someone separated us, we both nearly died. I am not leaving you. Find another plan." For a long moment, the Alpha King stared at her. "You really have changed," he murmured. "You have no idea." Hadron left through the eastern postern with the folio, carrying a sketch of Soraya's claiming mark and a lock of Ilara's hair as proof for the border packs. Soraya remained. And then Ravel arrived. 3 sharp raps on the chamber door, followed by the sweet voice Soraya had grown up listening to. The voice of the sister who had always smiled brightest when she held something that belonged to someone else. "My king? I have brought your morning tea." Kyle sat on the bed, the covers drawn to his chin, his expression carefully arranged into the compound's glassy vacancy. The performance was flawless. Months of imprisonment had given him intimate knowledge of how a drugged man looked. Every detail was precise. The empty eyes, the slack mouth, the mechanical breathing of a man whose body continued out of habit rather than desire. "Come," he rasped, letting the words slur. Ravel entered with a silver tray. She wore pale blue silk, her dark hair arranged in an elaborate cascade, her face painted with tender concern so convincing that Soraya felt her stomach lurch. Behind her, 2 replacement guards stood at rigid attention in the corridor. Ravel set the tray on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the mattress, reaching for Kale's hand with practiced gentleness. "How are you feeling this morning, my king? You look stronger. The healers say the worst has passed." Kale stared at the wall. "Sore. Aya." "Shh. You must not upset yourself. Soraya is at peace now. You must accept that." A hairline fracture in the mask, diamond wrapped in velvet. "And when you are well, I will be here, as I have always been." Soraya stepped out from behind the door. "Hello, sister." Ravel's head snapped around. The teapot rattled as her knee struck the bedside table. For one exquisite moment, every layer of careful composure was stripped away, and Soraya saw her sister's true face, the blind animal panic of a predator who had just discovered she was not the most dangerous thing in the room. You are dead. You are." "Clearly not, but I appreciate the effort your family put into making the story convincing. The burial records were a nice touch." Ravel's eyes darted to Kale, to Soraya, to the door. Calculating. Even now, cornered, exposed, face to face with the sister she had helped to bury alive, the wheels behind those pretty eyes were spinning. "Guards!" Revel screamed. The 2 Rivaran guards burst in, swords drawn, and Kale moved. It was not the explosive shift of a healthy alpha. It was something worse, something desperate and ragged and held together by willpower rather than strength. He came off the bed like a collapsing wall, his body shifting mid-lunge, and the wolf that emerged was not the magnificent creature Soraya remembered. He was thin, his dark fur patchy, his ribs visible beneath the coat. But his jaws still closed around the first guard's sword arm with enough force to shatter the steel bracer protecting it. The second guard swung at Kale's exposed flank. Soraya's knife caught the blade 6 inches from his body, a parry she had not known she was capable of until the silver edge met steel with a shriek that set her teeth on fire. The guard recovered, pulled back for a second swing, and Kyle's wolf hit him from behind with his full weight. Both went down. It was over in seconds. Ravel had not moved. She stood beside the bed, her silk dress spotted with blood that was not hers, her hands pressed to her mouth. Kyle shifted back, breathing hard, and Soraya caught him before his legs buckled. As Soraya bound Ravel's hands, her sister leaned close and whispered, "You think you have won something. The severance was only the surface. What lies beneath this castle is why Colvert truly wants control. And when he unlocks it, your Alpha King will be the least of anyone's concerns." "What is beneath the castle, Ravel?" Her sister smiled, vicious and knowing. "Ask your scar. It has been trying to tell you since you arrived." As if responding, the claiming scar began to vibrate again, that deep tremor pulling downward, toward the foundation, toward whatever was beating beneath the castle floor. Soraya descended alone, past the cellars, past the wine stores, past the level where the stone changed from cut blocks to rough-hewn bedrock. And as she went deeper, the vibration grew stronger. Not just the scar. The air itself pulsed. A rhythm. Slow. Massive. Like the heartbeat of something incomprehensibly large. The final passage opened into a cavern. The space was enormous. A natural cathedral carved by water over millennia. Bioluminescent moss cast the chamber in faint blue-green glow. And in the center, embedded in the stone floor as if it had grown there, was a heart. Not a human heart. Not a wolf's heart. The size of a carriage, its surface a deep, pulsing crimson shot through with veins of silver light. It beat with the same rhythm she had been feeling through the bond, a slow, thunderous cadence that shook dust from the ceiling. The heart of the first wolf. Every wolf child had heard the legend, the progenitor, the source of all wolf blood. When it died, its body became the mountains, its blood became the rivers, and its heart was hidden beneath the earth to ensure the bloodline would never fade. The legend said the heart was a myth. The legends were wrong. "This is why Colvert wants the castle," she whispered. "Not the throne. This." Whoever controlled the heart controlled the source of wolf power itself. The ability to grant or revoke the wolf within any member of the bloodline, boots on stone behind her, many of them. Colvert stood at the cavern entrance, flanked by a dozen soldiers. His smile was the smile of a man who had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. "The heart responds to the bond between true mates," Culver said. "An incomplete bond calls to it. A completed bond would control it. Why do you think I went to such extraordinary lengths to prevent you and Kale from completing yours?" Everything clicked into place. The abduction, the drugging, the severance. None of it was about the throne. The real prize was here. And the only mating bond strong enough to activate it belonged to Soraya and Kale. With the bond broken and Kale dead, the heart would become inert. Controllable, Culver continued. But now you are standing next to it with an incomplete bond and a scar that is already making it wake up. Which means I need you to die. He raised his hand. Kill her. The soldiers advanced. Soraya backed against the heart. Its surface was warm, alive, pulsing against her spine like a second heartbeat. And deep inside the castle, 4 levels above, the Alpha King felt it. She did not hear him coming. She felt him. A surge through the bond so violent it nearly knocked her off her feet. The cavern entrance exploded. Kyle came through it, half-shifted. Hands tipped with claws, eyes blazing full silver. The compound should have made a full shift impossible. But the bond was feeding him. Her strength pouring through the connection, multiplying and reflecting back and forth between them like light between 2 mirrors. He hit the soldiers without slowing. Not killing. Disabling. Breaking sword arms, shattering kneecaps, removing threats with the precision of a surgeon and the power of an avalanche. Culver stumbled backward. Impossible. The compound. Wore off. My mate is a healer, Culver. Did your plans account for that? The last soldier fell. Colvert stood alone, his mask shattered. It does not matter. The heart is waking. Without a completed bond, the activation will be uncontrolled. It will tear the wolf from every shifter in the Dominion, permanently. Soraya felt the truth of it through the heart's rhythm. It was accelerating. The silver veins were brightening to blinding intensity. She looked at Kale across the cavern. He looked at her. And in the space between heartbeats, they both understood. Complete the bond, Soraya said. He crossed the distance in 3 strides. His hands cupped her face, clawed, half-shifted, and trembling with barely contained power. Here. Now. Here. Now. While the heart can feel it. He kissed her. The bond detonated. She bit him at the same moment he bit her. His teeth found the claiming scar, the original site. Completing the circuit interrupted the night she was taken. Her teeth found the hollow of his throat, and she claimed him with a ferocity that surprised them both. The heart responded. The crimson surface blazed white. The silver veins expanded, racing through the bedrock like lightning frozen in glass. The cavern filled with light so intense that Colvert screamed and threw his arms over his face. Through the completed bond, Soraya felt everything. Every memory. Every wound. Every moment of the months they had been apart, experienced from his side. She felt him wake from the compound's grip in a panic so total it had taken 8 men to hold him down. felt him call her name until his voice broke, and then keep calling in a whisper. Felt him push back against the drugs with everything he had, night after night, reaching for her through a bond that was fraying at the edges, and holding on by sheer will and animal instinct, and a love so stubborn it refused to acknowledge the possibility of her death. And he felt her. The cell. The darkness. The weekly visits from Odara with her cold questions and colder eyes. The night she had clawed through the drainage grate with fingernails that split to the quick. The birth of their daughter by candlelight in a stranger's cottage while a spring storm raged outside. The moment Ilara opened her gray eyes for the first time, and Soraya had seen him looking back at her through their child's face. The months of pressing her hand to the bond scar at night, trying to push warmth across an ocean of distance to a man she was not certain could still feel it. He saw himself through her eyes. Not a king who had failed her, but a man who had been violated and poisoned, and had still, somehow, reached for her every single night through the haze. A man whose wolf had screamed the truth when his mind could not hold it. A man worthy of the love she had never stopped feeling, even in the darkest moments of her exile. And she saw herself through his. Not a servant who had overreached, but the woman who had clawed her way out of a grave, walked barefoot through snow, survived an ancient forest, unleashed a power she did not understand, and then walked back into the heart of enemy territory because she refused to let him die alone. The most extraordinary person he had ever known. His mate. His queen. The other half of his soul. The heart's power channeled through their bond like a river finding its course. Instead of tearing the wolf from every shifter, it reinforced them. A wave of stabilizing energy radiating outward through the bedrock, through the earth, reaching every wolf in the Western Dominion in a single heartbeat. In the capital, feral wolves stopped mid-snarl as clarity returned. In the border territories, packs went still as the bond hierarchy reasserted itself. In Greyhaven, in the deep thorn vale, a 2-month-old baby with gray eyes opened her mouth and howled for the first time, a sound so pure that Bray dropped the pot she was holding and stared. And far below the castle, the Alpha King heard his daughter's howl echo through the heart itself, a heartbeat beneath the castle floor that had been calling to him all along. The Reverend uprising ended not with a battle, but with a surrender. When Kale and Soraya emerged from the cavern, they found Fenric on his knees, his sword on the ground, and the soldiers around him dropping their weapons. The completed bond between the Alpha King and his true mate was radiating through every wolf in the building. The instinct to submit to a bonded alpha pair was not a choice. It was biology. It was law, written into the blood of every wolf who had ever lived. Odara Rivaran stood behind her son, and for the first time in Soraya's memory, her mother looked old. "The House of Rivaran is dissolved," Kyle announced. "Its lands are forfeit. Its titles are extinguished. Its members will face judgment before the assembled packs." Fenric opened his mouth. "Do not speak," Soraya said quietly. "You sent killers to murder your niece. There is nothing you can say that I want to hear." Hadron returned to find the castle already subdued. The completed bond had done the work for him, sending a pulse of truth through wolf instinct that no amount of manipulation could counterfeit. He dragged Colvert from the cavern in chains. The advisor was silent as they led him away. His grand design, 30 years of patient scheming, of accumulated knowledge about the heart beneath the castle, had been undone by the one thing he had spent all those years trying to prevent. Two people who refused to stop loving each other. In the days that followed, the Western Dominion healed with astonishing speed. The crops in the river provinces recovered almost overnight, as if the land itself had been holding its breath. The feral wolves returned to their packs, confused but unharmed, their instincts restored by the wave of stabilizing power from the heart. The border territories settled into peace as the bond hierarchy reasserted itself with renewed strength. Hadron rode to the Thornvale personally to bring Ilara home. Bray came with them, Flatly refusing to let the child out of her sight until she had assessed the castle's safety, the royal healer's competence, and every crib in the royal chambers. Kale offered her any reward in the kingdom. A cottage with southern light and a garden large enough for medicinal herbs, Bray said. And the right to tell you when you are being an idiot. Both were granted without hesitation. The moment Ilara was placed in her father's arms, the Alpha King broke completely. He held his daughter as if she were made of glass and starlight, his massive hands impossibly gentle. Ilara studied him with those solemn eyes, reached up with one small hand, and grabbed his lower lip. Kale laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in nearly a year, and the sound of it, raw and wondering and full of a joy so sharp it cut, made Soraya's tears fall so fast she could not see. "Thank you," he said, "for surviving, for fighting, for bringing her into the world when I could not be there, for coming back to me when every rational thought should have told you to run." Soraya leaned her head against his shoulder while their daughter dozed in his arms. "I never considered not coming back. The bond knew what my mind refused to accept." And what was that? That we were never finished. That somewhere beneath all the lies and the poison and the politics, there was a heartbeat that belonged to both of us. She pressed her hand to the scar, healed now into a beautiful silver mark that matched the one on his throat. It just took us a while to hear it. Outside the castle window, the wolves of Ashenmere began to howl. Not the anguished chorus that had plagued the capital for months. This was celebration, wild and joyful, and so full of life that the sound seemed to make the very stars vibrate. And beneath the castle floor, in the cavern where the heart of the first wolf beat its ancient rhythm, the silver veins pulsed once, warm, steady, content, and settled into silence. The bond was complete. The bloodline was secure. And in the great chronicles of the Western Dominion, a new chapter was inscribed. The story of a woman buried alive by her own family who clawed her way back to the surface. Of a king who whispered his mate's name into the darkness until the darkness finally answered. Of a love so stubborn and so fierce that it woke a 10,000-year-old heart from its slumber and healed a kingdom that had forgotten what it meant to be whole. They had tried to erase her. They had failed. And she would never be erased again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.